In the movie Invictus, the main character is talking to the captain of the rugby team as they're preparing for their championship. And there's a line in there that I absolutely love. And he says to him, he says, Francois, leadership is about us helping people to be better than they even think that they can be. And I think that's our responsibility to one another.
Hello and welcome to The Clear Voice, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. I'm your host, James Groom. This week with us is President of Clear, Michael Boese. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on again, James. I'm glad to see how well the podcast is going. Our position cast is just doing so many great things out there for candidates and for cities that are hiring for different positions. So really excited to be on the program today. And our guest is just one of those guests. I think I say this every time I'm on with a guest, but it's one of those people who have had just an enormous impact on my life. I consider her a mentor and just somebody that I've really learned so much from. And I'm very thankful for God bringing her into my life. So excited to have the conversation.
I am as well, and I'll read a quick bio. I can't cover everything because LaShon Ross is with us, and she has been in the public sector for over 30 years now. She's currently the deputy city manager in Plano, came up through the HR field, and has actually served in Plano as a DCM twice now. So we'll unpack that a little bit with her. Welcome to the show, LaShon. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
I'm glad to finally meet you. I've seen you on LinkedIn a couple of times, and Michael said nothing but nice things about you. That's normally Michael, though. He never says anything bad about anybody.
Exactly. I appreciate that.
So, LaShon, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into local government and what spurred you into the HR world?
It was an interesting thing. I remember being in high school and learning a little bit about human resources and thinking, I think I would like to work in human resources. That was the path that I was sort of following when I started college. I lived in Texarkana, so that's my home. I saw that there was a job opening for a temporary personnel secretary back before we called it human resources. It was still personnel back in 1988. I thought, well, I don't have any real HR experience. I'm still completing my bachelor's degree. Maybe this is a foot in. Maybe I can give this a try. And so I applied for that temporary personnel secretary position, was hired for that position. It became full-time regular shortly after that. I was in the director role probably within 2 to 3 years after that. It just continued. So I hear some people talk sometimes, James, about, well, I became an employee in local government because I wanted to serve. I became an employee in local government because I wanted to work in HR, and that's where the job was. But as it turns out, when I look back over 37 years now, it was absolutely the right role for me. I often tell people that I fell into this role that fits my personality perfectly. It turns out that it was the right thing for me. It turns out that being a public servant suits me very nicely. That's how I ended up in local government.
Well, it's amazing. And some of us, came into the field with that expectation of public service, but a lot of us I wanted to be a police officer. I didn't really know what that meant until I got into it and discovered that it was all about serving the people.
Yeah.
Texarkana, that's a little bit different place than Plano. How did you find that transition to be from Texarkana to Plano?
Yeah, it was a significant difference, actually. I had worked for the city of Texarkana, Texas for just about 13 years at the time that I left. When I decided to pursue the position in Plano, it was because I just, life comes to that point where I knew that I needed to do something different. There was nothing wrong in Texarkana. Texarkana was great for me. I feel like I was great for the city of Texarkana, Texas. It's my home. It's where my family was. But there came a time when I knew that I needed something different and I needed something more and I needed more runway to be able to maybe try some new things. I applied for this position as HR director at the city of Plano. And to your point, James, there was a time when I thought, should I do this? Am I really ready? Can I really compete in that arena? Aren't those people in that North Texas area going to be so much more sophisticated than I am? And will I be able to do the job? And will they, all the questions. Fortunately, I was hired for the job. What I learned, it took me probably about 6 to 9 months, certainly within that first year, I truly realized that people are people. Issues are issues. There might be more of them. The way that we tackle them might be different. The way that we live our lives and the amount of things and places and resources that we have access to might be different. But people are people. And that was what I learned. It was definitely still a big transition. Texarkana's tax base is very different. The environment is quite different. The municipality, much smaller than here. The organizational culture and even the community culture is different, but the issues were the same. And there were so many more opportunities to develop and grow and be exposed to a lot more things. And so there was certainly a learning curve on the front end, but it was more about adapting to culture and people and how we do things. The technical part is the technical part. Managing people and issues and processes is managing people and issues and processes. I think that we just have to figure out where it's scalable and how we need to change and how are we situationally aware and how do I know when I need to grow in a certain area? Do I know when to speak, when not to speak, what to say, how to adapt to different audiences? It was a big difference, but one that was certainly manageable, and it was definitely a growth opportunity for me.
Well, and you've been at Plano for a long time, and even down here on the southern side of the Metroplex and probably throughout the state, Plano has a reputation. And usually when I'm saying that, I'm trying not to be ugly about it, but Plano's reputation is actually stellar. When you hear Plano, you usually think of excellence and good governance. How does a city, especially grown the size as Plano, continue that thought process in everybody? How do you continue that tradition of excellence?
It's interesting. I was just talking to our city manager about this the other day. One of the things that we've been very fortunate about in Plano, way before I ever got here, way before many of us ever got here, is that when you look back at the history of Plano, we've had a lot of people, our elected officials, our community leaders and volunteers, and certainly our city officials too, a lot of people who have a history of planning. You go way back into like the 30s and 40s, there were people who were really planning for the future in Plano, trying to look forward and see what things are going to happen as we grow, as we change, as we evolve. The planning has continued, and I think that that's carried forward from generation to generation, whether it's in the municipality or in the community. We were talking about it just the other day. Our city manager had pulled some planning documents from years ago, and they were very much aligned with what we talk about today. Our city manager, within the past 3 years, actually commissioned some work that has now come to be called the fiscal roadmap that we use. And it was an exercise where someone came in and worked with us in doing this work, but looked at us then, say 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, looked at what our revenue streams were at that time, looked at what our demographics were, looked at how we were developing at that time, looking at it coming forward and going into the future and thinking about legislative changes. It's very clear that the characteristics that we had at that time and the resources that we had at that time and how we navigated that are different, and we have to adapt and adjust. It's the planning part, but it's also being visionary and knowing that the fact that we're excellent today or the fact that we have a reputation of excellence 5, 10, 15 years ago has nothing to do with whether we're going to be excellent 5, 10, 15 years into the future. We have to adapt. It's a very different environment. Expectations are different. Demographics are different. The requests for services are somewhat different. It's about being aware and also making the changes that we need to change and not resting on our laurels and saying, oh my gosh, we are so great. Everything is going to be fine. No, we have to continue to work. We have to continue to be aware. I was just telling someone the other day, I was teaching a class and we were talking about how the environment changes and how we adapt to it as public servants. And I was telling them, I remember the first time many years ago when I was here with Plano, that the first request came in for cricket fields and the emotions that came with that in our community, because you have people, citizens, residents saying, what do you mean cricket fields? We don't have enough soccer fields. We need soccer fields. We need softball fields. But demographics were changing when we first started talking about table tennis, and pickleball now. The way that service requests change and the way that we have to adapt to them as we talk about the number of seniors that continue to make their homes or to stay in place in Plano. We have to make those changes. Do we need another senior recreation center? How do we evolve and make sure that our existing recreation centers stay up to date and up to standard? And how do we make sure that we have the revenue for those things? So I think it really does come down to planning and having a history of planning and respecting the importance of planning in our organization and in our community, and also having leaders that are visionary to be able to look forward and say, okay, what do we need to be thinking about today so that we can make sure that our reputation is still intact in the future? Because at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is that our citizens have an expectation of excellence in services, and we cannot miss that target. And so we've got to be working hard every day to make sure that we're keeping up with what it is that they expect from us.
The planning portion is something that I think, unfortunately, some places miss. And how do you even know what to aim for if you don't have a plan? So,
yeah,
very important. You retired, I guess, from Plano a few years back and then decided to come back. What made you change your mind? Were you bored? Were you looking for something to do?
I was definitely not bored. Looking forward, if I go back years ago, my goal was to work 25 years in local government, get my children raised, and then go and do something else. At that point, if I look back, I don't know, 2005-ish, somewhere between 2005, 2015, my goal at that point was to go back to school, get my counseling degree, and to become a licensed professional counselor. That was my goal. So that was the plan. I was going to complete my career in local government, and then I was going to become a licensed professional counselor. I did complete my counseling degree, but when the time came for me to take the national exam and then do those 3,000 clinical hours to get my license, I said, this is not where I am in life right now. This is not what I want to do. But what I did know is that I teach a lot of professional development classes. Every class that I teach, I incorporate that learning about our emotional health and relationship management. So I use all of those skills for my own well-being and for classes that I teach for others. So when I retired, I had 28 years in local government. I felt like that was a nice round number. I had gone 3 years beyond what I had initially planned. When I retired from the city of Plano, I thought, well, I'll still teach a few classes here and there. I had a granddaughter at that time, my only grandchild. And so I said, I'll spend some time with Jaden and I'll do these things. Well, what happened is that I spent probably the first 5 months really taking care of Jaden and spending a lot of time with her. And I found that I really need more adult conversation than I thought that I did. I still wanted to spend time with her, but I wanted to do some other things too. I started working with the city of McKinney. They were building a training program at the time, started working with them, doing some development and classroom training for them, and then found myself teaching for a lot of different places, people who already knew me as a facilitator. And so I was teaching lots of classes. And then I think in 2017, the town of Prosper asked me if I would come and be their interim HR director. And I said, sure, why not? And so I went and I did that for a couple of years while I was still teaching classes for some other organizations. I left the town of Prosper after they hired their HR director, and I went to the city of Frisco to work as their interim HR manager. So I was there for a while, and then I left there and was interim HR director for the city of Nacogdoches for maybe about 6 months, 6, 7, 8 months. And in the meantime, still teaching lots of classes. I was like, wait a minute, I've got to figure out a better way to manage this. This isn't working out like I thought it was going to work. I thought I would do a little bit here and there, but I was doing a lot more. And I think that the thing that allows me to get kind of stuck in that kind of a schedule sometimes is that I absolutely love what I do. I love developing classes. I love teaching classes. I love interacting with people. I love the field of human resources. I love organization management. And so it's easy for me to say yes a lot and find myself busier than ever. I didn't have any downtime during those 6 years that I was retired. Literally, I had just finished my assignment with the city of Nacogdoches. I want to say in November or December of 21. I got a contact from one of the deputy city managers here at the city of Plano saying that their HR director had taken a promotion in another city and wanted to know if I would come and be the interim HR director. I said, well, I try not to ever say no to Plano. I think I can. And I think the other thing was that it was going to be a way out for me to say, okay, I can't do any of these other contracts anymore. I didn't know how to say no on my own, but Plano was going to save me because now I wouldn't have time to do that. I told the deputy city manager that, yes, we can certainly talk about that. She and I scheduled lunch. City manager came with her. By the end of lunch, it was no longer interim, and I was taking the role of their regular full time HR director. And I guess maybe a year and a half into it, I was asked to come back to the deputy city manager role. And here I am. The difference between then, when I left then, and now, I'm teaching a lot more classes internally too. So once again, here I am trying to figure out how to balance all of this. But that's how I got back. I certainly didn't ever see myself being back here full time, but Plano has played an amazing role in the life of my family and me. I love being a resident here. I love the time that I've spent working here. So if I can say yes to Plano, I'm going to say yes to Plano. And I just completed my 4-year anniversary. Well, in February, I think February 22nd. So here I am, and time continues to pass, and I'm still having a good time.
I'm glad they pulled you back in.
I think I am too.
You sound like the perfect person to ask this question to with your HR background. And plus, it sounds like you are one of these high performers. One of the things that I've become interested in is how do you evaluate your high performers when it comes to promoting them into the supervisory ranks? You would think that naturally those high performers that are the best at the job that they're doing would naturally be great at supervising. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes they fail when they move up in ranks. How do you evaluate who's going to be a good supervisor? How do you prepare maybe the high performer for the difference between doing the job and supervising the job?
Yeah, and you are just touching on every topic that I've been talking about for the last week or so. We have created, since I've been back, a supervisory slate of topics and classes because our supervisors, some of the people that come to us and said, hey, City of Plano does a great job of providing professional development and supporting us in multiple roles. But sometimes we feel like when we get promoted, it's like you say, congratulations and good luck. And so we thought, okay, we need to stop and spend some time on this. I think to answer your question is that too often we in organizations, we as managers, decision makers, will decide based upon someone's technical competence in an existing role that they must be ready to be an amazing supervisor and manager. We don't think about the fact that, well, right now, that person is managing their own performance and not having to manage the performance and relationships of other people, not having to really spend so much time looking at how is that person getting their work done. I think that as decision makers for many years, we've missed that. We evaluate it, to use your word, based upon what they're doing now, as opposed to how their skill set will translate to what they will need to do as managers. I was telling someone in class the other day, we have a buddy to boss class that we try to help people in their transition. And I was telling them that one of the things that happens when we get promoted sometimes is that we get there. It's really easy for me to say, hey, James, I could do your job really well because, when I'm playing second chair and looking from out here, it looks like I have all the answers. And then I sit in your chair. And then it becomes obvious to me that there were some other things going on that I had not planned for or thought about. I think that at that moment, then I don't want to start asking a lot of questions because I don't want it to look like I don't know what it is that I really don't know. I don't want you to look at me like, well, I messed up when I hired LaShon for that role. She was so good. I don't know what happened. Now she's not good and it's a problem and we're in conflict and we don't want to talk to one another. And so I don't want to ask you the question. You don't want to say anything to me. You're half mad about the fact that I'm not performing well anymore. But the whole skill set changed. What you need from me now is to be able to have all these interpersonal skills. And what I'm finding, certainly in a post-pandemic environment, is that not all of us who wear the title of manager have the leadership confidence, competence, or the interpersonal skills to be able to have the conversations that we need to have. And we've not been trained to have those conversations. I think that part of the evaluation of whether someone is ready is that we have to know the difference between what they're doing now and what they will be doing in the next job so that we can evaluate for that, not for what they're doing right now. It's great if I'm a wonderful backhoe operator, but does that say anything about how I'm going to work out as a superintendent having to manage the performance of 15 backhoe operators, the conflict that might happen. And certainly if I used to work alongside them and now I get promoted and all of a sudden I've gone from being their peer to being their supervisor, and all those conversations that we used to have about we all knew the ills of all management, and now I'm one of them. There's work to be done in understanding that. And I think that we have to evaluate for the job that we envision the person doing, not just automatically assume that what they're doing today necessarily translates to what they're going to be doing. And it's something that we have to work a lot on in our organization. But I also find in the classes that I teach for our supervisors that the supervisors are actually hungry for that information, hungry for the acknowledgement that it's not the same. And this was a big step. And how do we support them? And how do we listen to them and not listen to them with an eye of, oh, well, you're not as good as I thought you were. No, listen to them for what they need. And we figure out how is it that we can support them, because we're hopefully trying to make everybody successful and the organization. So I think that evaluation has to be accurate for what we're looking for. And I'm not always certain that we as decision makers are accurate about what it is that's needed in that next level position. So I think we've all got work to do there.
Yeah, I remember going from a frontline officer to a police sergeant. It's a big jump. And when you were talking about buddy to boss, I thought it was hilarious because they didn't have anything like that. And I did get called out a couple of times for, well, 2 weeks ago, you were doing the same thing you're telling me not to do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a tough transition.
One of the things we talk about quite a lot, James, in that situation is that we help supervisors to understand that sometimes a reset is necessary. And when I say supervisor, I mean at any level, whether it's a department director, a manager, to take the time when they first move into the position to first get to know the role, get to know the people. If they already know the people, get to know them from a different seat and from a different perspective. And then to really understand what is working well and what's not working so well, then have a reset and sit down and talk with everyone and say, hey, y'all, I understand how we used to do this. I understand what the expectations were, but going forward, this is how we're going to do it. And we want to set everybody up for success. So we're telling everyone from here, this is the way it's going to be in the future. We're going to put this in writing so that everyone understands. So each one of us is not left with our own interpretation. Hopefully we don't have to hear, well, that's not how we used to do it. Okay, but we've talked about the fact that this is how we will be doing it going forth. And not to really sort of beat down whatever it was before or whoever was there before, because the reality is that there may be some processes and practices and policies and procedures that worked well 5 years ago. It doesn't mean that they work well today. And that people component, what I find is that if I look back the whole time that I've been in local government, the vast majority of issues that people come to me for and the things that I work on they are almost never about tactical things. It's about, well, so-and-so is getting paid 50 cents more than I did, and I don't understand why that's happening, or I can't get along with this person, or this person told someone some information that they shouldn't have told them. I didn't get the promotion and I've been here longer. It's the people stuff. We do our supervisors at any level a disservice if we don't immediately start training them for what it's going to mean when we honor them with that promotion.
You mentioned your program. Is that a one-day class or is that some sort of structured program?
It's not a one-day class. It's a series of classes that we put together based upon some focus groups and feedback about the types of things that we need to make sure that our supervisors are aware of. They're usually about 3 to 4 hour classes. Documentation basics is one that I do because supervisors have to understand the importance of documentation. We had some police officers in our class that we last taught. And sometimes we talk about police and fire or some other types of roles where you all have to fill out a lot of information. Your documentation is very important. And some of us, depending on our positions, don't always think about that the same. And so we talk about the importance of documentation, the importance of being able to defend our decisions, the importance of giving people a fair opportunity to know where the lines are in terms of performance. And then we have one, it's called the C2 organization. It's about compliance and care. And it really is about employment law, helping supervisors to understand how to navigate the employment law, to even understand why do we even need to have employment laws? Why are they there? And then the importance of understanding them so that we can comply, so that we understand that we are making decisions that we may have to defend on the part of the organization and even us as individuals. I think there are 2 or 3 other positions. The buddy to boss is one of them as well. We do some emotional intelligence training. We have just a myriad of topics, and we pulled all of them from the things that we think our supervisors most need to know to help them to be successful as supervisors. It's worked out really well. I think we're about 2 years in on that now. We're getting really good feedback. I find that when I'm in class with them, they are really engaged, and I try to work really hard. I'm not the only facilitator there. We do lots of training, but we try to make sure that we have a culture where people feel safe talking about what they need to talk about. I start pretty much every class telling the attendees that this is our practice ground. This is our training ground. Let's learn how to talk about what we need to talk about, because I find that it is so unfortunate that many times the stuff we most need to talk about are the things that we are most fearful of talking about. And we've got to figure out how to do it better. I tell them, let's practice here. Let's do it respectfully. Let's do it in ways that are appropriate. But let's say the stuff that we really need to say. So it's worked out really well for us. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback, and we're just continuing to grow it as we see the need.
And that's one of the things that I've seen that is really difficult in some places, is having that space where people feel safe of saying things. And even the supervisors, sometimes that's one of their biggest negatives, is they can't have those crucial conversations with employees and let them know in a respectful manner what the issue is and talk through the problems. Any advice for somebody who needs to do some coaching and is hesitant?
Yeah. One of the things that I remind people about here, and everything that I remind other people about, I'm telling myself all the time too. I remind us and our supervisors and leaders in our organization that I said this in class just the other day. I said, y'all, when we say yes to the promotion, when we want to become a leader, and when we become a leader at any level, it's an all-inclusive yes. That means that it's not just, yes, I want the money. Yes, I want the title. Yes, this is my new rung on my career ladder. It's yes, I'm going to do all that I can to do this job and to do it well. I think that as leaders, when we're thinking about a promotional opportunity, we have to remember that there's a responsibility that comes with that promotion. We don't get to just come over there and choose to do the things that are comfortable. I was telling them in class the other day that there's a body of research that says that as human beings, we are inherently uncomfortable with discomfort, which means then that we will continue to do stuff, stay in positions, stay in jobs that we say we hate, because we cannot even consider the discomfort of a change. And I think that we have to not see those parts of our job as optional. And I also encourage people that when we practice, we get better. It doesn't have to be that we're thinking that conflict in and of itself is always disruptive and catastrophic. No, conflict can be that thing that can take us to a point where we can have the conversation that we really need to have. We talk about truth over harmony and harmony over truth in our organization. Sometimes we will be so insistent on harmony that we will dilute what really needs to be said down to a point that it's not even effective anymore, because harmony is more important to us than the truth. And then we wonder, why are we still 3 years later still dealing with these same issues? I think it's about practice. It's about support. It's about the organizational culture supporting us when we misstep and when we make a mistake, and say, hey, we saw that. It's fine. Let's figure out what happened and let us help you on a path to go forward. That kind of coaching, to your point, James, I think should be part of what all of us do. I don't know that any of us ever get to a point where we know everything. And there's no room for growth, particularly in an environment like we live in today, where change is just happening, where socio-political things find themselves into the work environment, and then we have to learn how to deal with those while still getting our work done and being efficient and maintaining relationships. I think it just takes practice, and we've got to learn how to talk about the things that we most need to talk about.
I always talk about which hill to die on. For me,
Yeah.
Michael and I think get along really well, because I think he's more hesitant to talk about the things that are going on sometimes. And I have to restrain myself from saying everything that I want to say. So
Yeah. There's a balance there somewhere.
Yeah, if we can meet in the middle, then we're
Mhm.
we're doing all right, I think.
Yeah.
35 years in public service. At some point in time, you're going to retire for real. What legacy do you want to leave behind? What do you want said about you?
I've had the same legacy for as long as I can remember. The legacy that I want to leave behind is that I have conducted myself with people and modeled and lived the things that I've talked about in such a way that years from now, when I'm no longer here, the impact and the influence is still there. Somebody might think, oh my gosh, you remember when LaShon said, and it's something not just for the sake of remembering LaShon, but something that actually helped someone to be better. In the movie Invictus, the main character is talking to the captain of the rugby team as they're preparing for their championship. And there's a line in there that I absolutely love. And he says to him, he says, Francois, I think that leadership is about us helping people to be better than they even think that they can be. I think that's our responsibility to one another. I think it's about so much more than a career path. I think it's about, as human beings, what are we doing for one another? And if I happen to find myself in a role where I have access to many people and I live in such a space of gratitude, I have had such a rewarding career. I have had so many opportunities. I have had so many relationships that I've built, but I will always say, I will give myself credit. I've also done the work. I've also looked around. I don't think that we can just exist and expect the best things to happen. That might happen for someone, but for me, it's been grasping the opportunities and being committed to doing my best work in everyone. I want my legacy to be that during my time on earth, I lived my life in such a way and worked with people in such a way and regarded them in such a way that years from now, they're still doing the same for others, and that the impact of the decisions that I've made and the work that I've done continues way beyond my presence here on earth. That's the legacy that I want. And I was thinking, you talk about retirement. I was thinking about it the other day, and I think I was maybe even talking to someone. My thoughts about retirement at this point in my life are different than they were when I started planning my first retirement. At this point, I don't know if it's as defined. You know, when I first came back to the city of Plano, the city manager asked me for 3 to 5 years. And initially I was like, okay, let me see what date that is. And at this point, we've got initiatives happening. I'm having a good relationships are well. I'm still physically healthy and emotionally healthy, I think. I'm thinking, I need to play this out. There is no hard stop. As long as I can continue to evolve and do things that are purposeful and useful, then I think I'll know when the time is right, just like I knew in 2016. Started planning for that somewhere around 2014. So we'll see. We'll see. But the legacy is the same. I want the time to be meaningful and purposeful, and I want my time on earth to have mattered long after I'm gone.
I'm sure it does. Your philosophy on getting people to the level that they can achieve, even though they don't think so. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people in government that don't realize the impact that they're having currently, and they don't really, maybe they have imposter syndrome. I know I do. They're able to do so much more, and they just need that encouragement to take that next step or apply for that
Yeah.
promotion or whatever it is.
I was telling some people just the other day, and I might have been in class again, that I said, let's look at it this way, y'all. We talk a lot about being public servants, and we have our thoughts about, you know, what it means and what it looks like to be a public servant. I said, but think about this. The real measure of what we do every day, regardless of what our roles are in local government, is that we are enhancing quality of life for thousands of people. And I don't know that we think about it like that as much. When we use that title public servant, it really does sometimes come out more about servitude. But we're talking about the fact that people's lives are made better because of the work that we do, whether it's policing our environment and making sure that people are safe, whether it is parks and recreation and helping some of the companies, even the companies that are looking at coming to Plano, to look at, okay, how are my people going to feel in the environment? What are the leisure spaces? What are the opportunities? Whether it's safety through our environmental health department, our fire department being amazing about being able to take care of us when we have emergencies, looking at how do we build infrastructure? How do we, in our public works department, make sure that we maintain? All of us have a role to play. And I remind people all the time, there is no, well, I'm just, there is no just. We are all very important, and the whole works because each one of our jobs individually works. when we really think about the measure of what we do as public servants and how we enhance quality of life for so many people, I think it can bring about a sense of pride that helps us then to see that it's not just a job. It's something that really does make a difference on a much broader scale.
Yeah, I never really had to remind cops of how important their jobs were, but I always saw with public works, especially, they
Yeah.
don't understand what it is. You're delivering safe drinking water to thousands or hundreds of thousands of people or whatever it is, and making sure the toilets flush. The fire department can't do their job without water, and nobody cares if the police come if the toilets don't flush, as Michael used to tell me when we were doing budget back in the day. So,
It's all an interdependent process. It makes a difference.
Yeah, LaShon, I wanted to just kind of chime in here for a second and to say, Plano, I think coming from that organization myself, did a really excellent job of casting a wide net to provide opportunity for growth. When I look back at the leaders who are currently there, and then even leaders who've left and moved on to other things, there's so many people who continue to grow there. And I think that's one of the reasons that Plano sees the success that it does see is the intentionality of growth.
Hmm.
But the other thing I really love what you said was in communication when you're talking in Plano, and something that I think I learned from you and from other people is you really have to be intentional with that communication. Do you kind of find that like communication isn't just something that's going to just happen? I think a lot of us just feel like, hey, people will come to me, or I'll eventually get around to it. But you really have to be intentional with where you're communicating, and making sure you're opening those avenues.
I think that is so important, Michael. And I say all the time, my personal opinion is that if we can get communication right, if we could do it better, I think a lot of our other stuff resolves itself. I am amazed sometimes how some of us will just open our mouths and let anything roll out and be confused as to why anybody is offended. I think that communication is so important. How we communicate, whether we think about how is this going to affect the relationship? How is this going to affect my credibility? How are people going to look at me? Am I trying to get to resolution? Am I being clear about what I'm saying? How might this person feel when I say something this way? And as we become more demographically diverse and culturally diverse, and as we live in this digital age where all kinds of information and images are just at our fingertips all the time, we got to know how to manage that. We can't just say anything. There in the book, Think Again, Adam Grant, I think is his name, he talks about cognitive laziness. And I think about that in relation to communication. And I think about that as we talk about the use of technology, which is not new, but as we talk about AI quite a lot, we cannot allow ourselves to become so cognitively lazy that we just grab whatever headline, we accept whatever's happened, whatever image we see, we just immediately think that it's real and true. And just how we talk to one another. And even as supervisors, when we talk about being a supervisor, we talk in our organization about you have to be mindful of how you talk. The right answer is not, well, because I'm the boss. That is not the right answer. People don't want to hear that. And many people are not going to listen to that. I think that the post-pandemic work environment, there's a whole other group of people out here now that have found their voices. And if we as managers don't find ours and learn how to effectively communicate to broad audiences, still thinking about how am I representing my organization, my community, it doesn't serve us well. I think that communication is one of the most important things that we can do. And I also find that we're not always so comfortable with communicating. And so again, the things that we need to talk about, we don't always, when we talk about something as simple as performance management, one of the challenges sometimes with a performance evaluation or performance management is that we don't say what we're really trying to say. And then the employee maybe doesn't get a clear picture of what they need to work on. And then if that ends up with a disciplinary action or a termination and that person's attorney or EEOC shows up, then at that moment, we see that our documentation wasn't that good. And it's just about communicating. And I really think that where the real rub is dealing with regulating the emotions around that communication. We've got work to do. It doesn't mean that we're not doing well in many areas, some of us better than others, but that communication thing is so very important. And how we tee it up, how we start out has everything to do with where is it going to go from there.
yeah, I think that communication thing keeps coming up over and over again. It's not just the words that you say, it's how they're received. And that's sometimes difficult. Like we were talking earlier, if you get promoted internally, everything that you've done before that is part of you. And And if you don't have the greatest reputation, I don't know if you have any advice on how you fix that. If you're not been well received for whatever reason, how do you, if you're self-aware enough, how do you fix that?
I think it's helpful. You talked about coaching earlier, James. I think it's helpful when those of us who are in decision making roles, who have done the promotions, who have made the hires, and have responsibility for then coaching a person to be more successful. I think it's really important that we do our jobs. We were talking about this week too. When we see that behaviors, words, decisions, actions are not aligned with our core values and our performance expectations, then we have to say something about that. It's not okay for me to have been in the organization for a long time. I've not been behaving and acting and making decisions as I should. It's not aligned with the respect, values, and other things that we have in our core values. And say, you're my supervisor, James, and you see me doing that. And your answer is, well, that's just LaShon. She's been that way for 10 years, y'all. Just look over her. I know she flies off, but just don't worry about it. She gets the other parts of the job done. It's not okay. And sometimes we see it happening and we say nothing. And then one day something blows and we want to get angry with that person and say that, well, you haven't been doing this. I've had enough. You're fired. And then HR and legal say, okay, let's just go back and visit the performance evaluations, wherein we find that there is no issue documented in that HR file because I was never comfortable enough to say anything about it. We have got to talk about the things that we need to talk about. Bruce Glasstalk, our previous city manager, and prior to that, previous police chief, would always tell us when he was city manager, he said, y'all, when we know better, we need to do better. And Dr. Maya Angelou says, do the best with what you know. But when you know better, when we take all these classes, when we have the coaching, when we have the mentoring, when we learn from life experiences, when we fall on our heads, when we get back up, when we know better, then we need to do better. But you, as my supervisor, should not sit there and watch me not doing better and just turn a deaf ear and look the other way because you don't want the discomfort of talking to me. Your whole job is to make sure that I am doing what I need to do and not allow me to do those things because other people are looking too. Your credibility is going down the drain, and other people are saying, well, why am I trying to do the right thing? And why does this person not have to do those things? I think we have to speak up. We have to do our jobs. And where we're not comfortable, we need to take steps to get more comfortable.
LaShon, one of the things that we've been fortunate on this show to be able to do is talk to a couple students now that are in MPA programs. And if you were going to speak to that audience, these are people that are coming straight out of high school, going into college, and wanting to go into, a lot of them, local government. What advice would you have for them?
I would tell them to think for themselves, first of all, get to know themselves, take an inward look, find out what's important to them, find out what they really want to do. Are they pursuing a particular path of education and career focus because somebody else told them that it would be good and that's what they should do because it pays a certain amount of money? I would tell them to spend some time really understanding themselves and what's important to them. And then spend some time learning how to set boundaries with other people as they speak to them, talk to them, when they interact with them. Learn how to set boundaries, be willing to do the work, be open to constructive feedback, and know that there's a thing called intellectual humility that is simply a statement that none of us knows everything. And we need to be smart enough to know that. And when we realize what we don't know, then just take the proper paths to get there. I would encourage them to do those things that are fulfilling to them and to be willing to do the work and to do the things that they're doing for the reasons that are important to them. I would ask them to find their voices. I would ask them to learn how to effectively communicate. I would ask them to ask questions because we don't want them just accepting everything blowing in the wind. There's such massive amounts of information that have to be managed. And I think there's danger in just accepting it from wherever it comes from. I would ask them to protect their core from listening to just any and everything, from looking at images from everywhere. I would ask them not to get involved in every argument just because they feel like this is what they believe and they should jump right in. Be mindful, be smart, use their time well. And I would tell them that I believe if they practice those things, then they will find themselves in a place that is fulfilling, that gives them a feeling of contentment and still positions them to be able to grow and have the successes that they would like to have in life. But my focus, James, I would really tell them there's a whole lot of self-work that needs to happen in this arena in an increasingly complex world and society that we live in. It's all the more important for us to be able to think for ourselves and not get stuck in cognitive laziness, but to question and explore and be willing to do the work.
That's great advice. Thank you. Michael, before we wrap up, is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to say?
No, I think we had a great conversation and loved listening to LaShon. I think we had a chance to work with a different organization that LaShon's involved with CPS HR, working with the outgoing director, Jerry, and talking about what he thought about legacy and things. I really feel like what he told me when I was visiting with him was, legacy is something that other people write for us, right? We focus in on impact. I really am excited that we got to have this conversation with you because I know you had impact on my life and so many other people, and just being able to continually have that voice. You're one of those people who maybe sees potential in people and helps them recognize that, and I think that's something that I appreciate in you so much. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Michael. And let me just say that you and Clear Career Professionals did such an amazing job with us at CPS HR. And we are having such a wonderful time working with Katie, heading out there next week for our retreat and board meeting. I have one more board meeting after this, and I will no longer be the board president, and I'll be stepping down for the second time, James. You did such an amazing job. Your company did such an amazing job with that search, and we are in really good hands, and we appreciate you.
Absolutely. Well, and it was an honor to work with the team. And I'd love to get Katie on the podcast sometime to talk, all that she has going on. And I know CPS HR has so much that they do as far as impacting organizations throughout the country, and just love to hear what she's got the organization moving towards.
That would be great. May I mention that to her when I see her next week?
Absolutely.
Great. I'll do it.
LaShon, is there anything that you want to cover before we sign off?
I think we've talked about everything. I'm just so appreciative that you all had me here today. I think that I tell people all the time, I think life is an amazing teacher if we're willing to learn the lessons that life teaches. And I think that every moment that I have, whether, to sit here and converse with you and Michael, or to have this opportunity, I take all of them as opportunities to learn and to build relationship. And so I just appreciate being here. Thank you.
And will you leave us with some advice for city managers and your colleagues in city administration dealing with this difficult world, this highly charged political environments that we have even on the local levels now? What can you tell them to help them through their day-to-day?
I will say, let's not stop being visionary. Let's make sure that we are stepping into the roles that have been given to us and making sure that we have the leadership courage to do the things that most need to be done, not just for this moment, but things that are going to have a very long-lasting impact, and to make sure that we're up to the task when we say yes to the job. The jobs will not become easier, I don't think, but they don't have to necessarily be hard if we do our work and if we practice the skills that are needed in this environment where communication and relationships just make a lot of difference. Really, what we have to do today is to really be relationship focused. Think about those soft skills and know that the soft skills really do lead to operational outcomes. And it's important that we be able to manage that.
Well, thank you, LaShon. Thanks for giving us some great things to think about, and for joining us today, giving us your perspective and sharing a little bit about your impactful career in public service. I want to thank Michael for being here as usual. I also want to thank our listeners for joining us, and we appreciate everything that you do in your communities day in, day out. Definitely check out Clear Career Professionals' LinkedIn page and our website for exciting career opportunities in local government, and we will catch you next time.